Respiration in organisms and different types of respiratory organs and modes of respiration in organisms. Respiration is the process of uptake of oxygen by the cells and release of carbon dioxide and water molecules. And this respiration is a catabolic process where the food is being broken down into simple form. In short, we can say respiration as the biochemical activity taking place in the protoplasm of cell, and that helps in producing the energy in the form of ATP molecules. Now, difference between breathing and respiration. So, breathing is the mechanism by which organisms obtain oxygen from the air and the release of carbon dioxide. So, here the time of breathing in humans, we can see the elevation of muscles. Okay, when there is inspiration and muscles return to their normal stage at the time of exhalation. It is the physical process, and here it involves the lungs of the organisms. And coming to the respiration, it is the breathing in the cell. That is the oxidation of the food molecules in the cell of the organism to release energy. This respiration occurs at the cellular level for the uptake of nutrients or breaking down of complex molecules into simple molecules. So we can say it as the biochemical process. Here it involves the cell organelle mitochondria, which releases oxygen for aerobic respiration. Now the respiration is being classified into two types. They are the aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration occurs in presence of oxygen. Anaerobic respiration occurs in absence of oxygen. No oxygen is present. Okay, so here it occurs in the absence of oxygen, whereas in aerobic respiration it occurs in the presence of oxygen. So these organisms which take oxygen are called as aerobes, and the organisms which can survive in the absence of oxygen is called as anaerobes. So they also have, all the aerobes have the cell organelle called as mitochondria, which helps in aerobic respiration. So here in anaerobes, the process of glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell, and they do not have mitochondria. And here in aerobic respiration, the process of breakdown of glycolysis leads to the simple molecule pyruvic acid or pyruvate, which is in turn broken down into carbon dioxide and water. Okay, and now here this is the glucose molecule. In the presence of oxygen, that is aerobic respiration, it is being broken down into simple molecules, that is oxygen and the carbon dioxide and water, and the energy is released. Approximately 36 molecules of ATP are generated, and this is seen in all higher organisms. Coming to the other case, that is in anaerobic respiration, the breakdown of glucose occurs in absence of oxygen, where it broken down into pyruvic acid. So here only two molecules of ATP are produced. Aerobic respiration leads to high production of energy, but anaerobic respiration gives less amount of energy. And this is also found in microorganisms like yeast as well as certain parasites and prokaryotes. So the glycolysis, the breakdown of sugar molecules in the absence of oxygen, leads to pyruvic acid, and the total energy produced here is only 2 ATP molecules in case of anaerobic respiration. In case of aerobic respiration, it produces 36 ATP molecules. So in the mitochondria, so this glycolysis occurs outside the mitochondria, whereas it produces two molecules of ATP, and in the mitochondria, in the presence of oxygen, this pyruvic acid is in turn broken down into carbon dioxide and water, where it produces 36 molecules of ATP. Total this 36 and 2 molecules of ATP outside the mitochondria by glycolysis produces 38 molecules of ATP. In anaerobic respiration, the best example is a fermentation. Okay, when alcohol is being produced, it is called as alcoholic fermentation. We can see this in yeast. So here the glucose molecule is being broken down in absence of oxygen, that is anaerobic respiration or fermentation. It produces ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. This ethyl alcohol or ethanol in the presence of the bacteria Acetobacter aceti produces acetic acid and water. So here the ethanol or alcohol is produced is undergoing development into vinegar. Okay, so this is by the action of the microbe Acetobacter aceti. So in anaerobic respiration, we can also see in the skeletal muscles at the time of vigorous exercise where the glucose is being broken down into lactic acid in case of anaerobic respiration. So this occurs in the bacteria as well as parasitic worms and in the human skeletal muscles at the time of vigorous physical exercise. The types of aerobic respiration are direct respiration and indirect respiration. Direct respiration occurs in the exchange of oxygen with carbon dioxide in the cells. And here it does not include any respiratory organs and their transportation occurs by simple diffusion. No respiratory organs are present. Example for that is the simple organisms like sponges, plants, bacteria, aerobic bacteria have this simple diffusion of gases. In indirect respiration, they involve the respiratory organs for transportation of gases, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide. It also involves the blood for their transportation. Now, the different methods of respiration are the simple diffusion through the skin, which we call it as cutaneous respiration. Example for that is annelids as well as amphibians. Buccalopharyngeal respiration, where at the buccalopharyngeal region, the high dispersion of blood capillaries, the gases are being diffused. This we can see in the frogs or amphibians. Branchial respiration, it is being exhibited by annelids, crustacean and mollusk and all the fishes, where the gills are the respiratory organs for the transportation of gases. So the examples of this is a fish usually respired by gills, amphibians by lungs, gills, buccalopharyngeal respiration, plants by stomata, worms through moist skin, and the humans, birds, reptiles and mammals respire with the help of respiratory organ lungs. So the three different ways of breathing are, the first one is in the humans where there is complete development of lungs for the exchange of gases. And in the birds, the special transportation of oxygen occurs which give continuous supply of oxygen to the body. And in the grasshopper or in the insects they have the tracheal system where the lungs are absent. The trachea are highly developed into tracheoles and they are dispersed throughout the body for the transportation of gas. So now coming to the transportation or the arrangement of respiratory system in birds. You know, the birds can fly at higher altitudes and they are successful in exhibiting aerial mode of life. What made the bird to be successful to fly at a higher altitude is their special respiratory system. Now here in the respiratory system of the bird, it consists of the external nates which are opened into the trachea. The trachea is now opened into the lungs. The lungs are now surrounded by the air sacs. The sacs which are present towards the posterior region are called as posterior air sacs and the sacs which are present towards the anterior region they are called as anterior air sacs. These posterior ones are called as posterior air sacs. Okay, and the air sacs which are present towards the anterior end is called as anterior air sacs. So these are the anterior air sacs. Okay, so this is the arrangement of the respiratory system. Now let us see the mechanism of flow of air. Anterior air sacs. The lungs here in the bird are also called as parabronchi. So now if you see here the mechanism of the respiration in birds. So the external nares are opened into trachea, the lungs are present. Okay, and these lungs are being surrounded by the air sacs. So these are the posterior air sac and these are the anterior air sacs. Okay, now here let us assume that the bird is taking in the air. Okay, when it is taking in air, the trachea is being filled up by oxygenated air. Okay, the atmospheric air consists of high amount of oxygen. So this oxygenated air is being filled up in the posterior sacs firstly. After filling up of posterior sac, the blood is now flowing into the lungs. Okay, or simply we can call them as parabronchi. After reaching the parabronchi, there is exchange of gas. Okay, now here after exchange, it forms the deoxygenated air. The deoxygenated air, now it is being sent into the anterior air sac, and here there will be filling off with the deoxygenated air in the anterior air sacs. Okay, and now these are the steps which happens at the time of inhalation. At this the time of inhalation, the air is being flowing inside. Firstly, there is filling in the posterior air sac. After that, it is going into the lung. After that, there is exchange of air, and thereby it is being flowing into the anterior air sac. Now, what happens to the muscles of the bird means the muscles are elevated. Okay, and when this is elevated, this posterior air sacs and anterior air sacs are being elevated. All of them are increasing their size and filled up by oxygenated air at one side and deoxygenated air at other side. After filling, at the time of exhalation, the volume of this sacs are being decreased because again there is depression of muscles. The muscles are being going into the normal stage. At that time, the volume of this sacs will be decreased. When the volume is decreased, the pressure is automatically increased. When the pressure is raised, then the air which is present in the anterior air sac is being released out. So, what type of air is being presented here means the deoxygenated air or the carbon dioxide is being released out. Now, what happens towards the other side means here when there is a decrease in the volume, automatically the pressure increases here at the time of dropping of muscle size or when they are coming to their normal stage. Okay, when the size of these sacs are decreased, now the blood from this posterior sac is again going to the lungs at the time of exhalation. So, at one side, the deoxygenated blood, the deoxygenated air or carbon dioxide is going out, and towards the other side, the oxygenated air from the posterior air sac is reaching the lungs. Okay, simultaneously at the time of expiration also there is transportation of oxygenated air to parabronchi or to the lungs. So this made the birds to be successful in exhibiting aerial mode of life by continuous supply of oxygen. Now if you assume the human body, when we are exhaling there is no transportation of oxygen. Only after completion of exhalation or releasing out of carbon dioxide only Again, in the next step, the oxygen is taken in, but it is not. This is bidirectional flow of transportation of gas in birds. Even at the time of releasing of carbon dioxide here, the bird is again transporting the oxygenated air from the posterior sac to the lungs. So there is bidirectional flow of gas, and this made the bird to be the successful one. So here you can see at the time of inspiration the oxygenated air is being reaching the posterior sac. Once the posterior sac is being filled up, now it is being reaching the lungs, and in the lungs there is exchange of gas at the time of inspiration. Simultaneously, what happens at the time of inspiration means after exchange the deoxygenated air or carbon dioxide air is being filled in the anterior air sac. Okay, at the time of expiration, what happens means from here after exchange, when the pressure is being increased, the deoxygenated blood from here will be flowing outside. Okay, simultaneously what is happening at the time of expiration means the posterior air sac is transporting the oxygenated air to lungs. That is, there is continuous supply of oxygen. Even at the expiration process also, oxygen is being transported from posterior air sac to the parabronchi. So this posterior air sac is supplying oxygen to the oxygenated air to the lungs. Okay, so this is being transported to lungs at the time of expiration. Okay, and again when there is a pressure, high pressure increased here, there is again release of this deoxygenated air from the anterior air sac to outside. So the carbon dioxide is being released out. So these are the events which occurs at the time of respiration in the birds. So the types of indirect respiration. In indirect respiration, it requires the respiratory organs. And here it is of two types, external respiration and internal respiration. External respiration occurs by the respiratory organs, that is here it involves the lungs or trachea or gills for transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the alveoli and blood capillaries, that is pulmonary capillary. In internal respiration, this happens at the cellular level or at the cells for breaking down of complex food molecules into simple molecules. Thereby, it releases the waste molecule in the form of carbon dioxide after combustion. It releases the end products as the carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so here for breakdown, it requires the oxygen. So, or aerobic respiration. So, this is the gas exchange between the tissue cells and blood in systemic capillaries. If you like the video, share and subscribe. This is Pravalika signing off.